I'm Bianca, 28 years old, and I'm standing outside my childhood home on Christmas Eve with an eviction notice in my hand. Through the frosted window, I can see my parents laughing with my younger sister, Sophia, passing around gifts like I never existed. 6 months ago, they looked me in the eyes and said the words that shattered my world. "We should have stopped after Sophia. You were never meant to be born." Now they've changed the locks, and I'm about to discover just how far parents will go to erase their mistake. Before we dive into the story, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. If you've ever felt like the black sheep of your family, hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. Trust me, this journey gets intense, and you'll want to see how I went from being called my parents' biggest mistake to finding my ultimate freedom. Growing up in our pristine colonial house in Westport, Connecticut, you'd think I had the perfect life. My father, Harold, was a successful investment banker who commuted to Manhattan in his Mercedes, while my mother, Catherine, built her real estate empire from our home office that overlooked the pool. We had everything money could buy, except what I desperately needed, parents who actually wanted me. The difference between how they treated me and my sister Sophia became crystal clear when we were teenagers. Sophia got a brand new BMW for her 16th birthday, while I got a bus pass and a lecture about learning the value of money. When Sophia graduated from Harvard Law, they threw her a party that cost more than my entire college education. When I graduated with honors from nursing school on a full scholarship, I'd earned myself they didn't even show up. "We had a property showing," my mother said later, not even trying to hide her disinterest. I became a pediatric nurse saving children's lives every day at Connecticut Children's Hospital. But to my parents, Sophia's engagement to Christopher Whitman, son of Senator Whitman, was the only achievement that mattered. I thought I could live with being second best. I thought if I just worked hard enough, saved enough lives, maybe one day they'd see my worth. I was wrong. Everything changed the day they summoned me to their home office. My mother sat behind her mahogany desk like a queen holding court while my father stood by the window, not even bothering to look at me. "Bianca, we've arranged for you to marry Thomas Chen," my mother announced, sliding a photo across the desk. His father is merging his pharmaceutical company with Harold's investment firm. This marriage will solidify the partnership. I stared at the photo of a man I'd never met, my stomach churning. "I'm not marrying someone I don't know," I said firmly. "I'm dating someone, and even if I wasn't, I won't be sold off like property." The silence that followed felt like a blade. My father finally turned around, his face twisted with disgust. "You ungrateful little parasite," he spat. "After everything we've done for you?" "Everything you've done," I laughed bitterly. "You mean tolerating my existence?" My mother's eyes went cold. "You want to be independent, fine. You're on your own." She picked up her phone and started making calls right there in front of me. Within 10 minutes, she'd canceled my health insurance, removed me from the family phone plan, and changed every streaming service password. It was surgical, precise, and cruel, but that was just the beginning. Over the next week, I started noticing things. Extended family members who usually chatted with me at gatherings now avoided eye contact. My cousin Laura, who'd always been friendly, actually crossed the street when she saw me coming. Then I found out why. At my Uncle Robert's birthday dinner, I overheard Aunt Patricia whispering to another relative. "Catherine says Bianca's having a mental breakdown. Apparently she's been making wild accusations and acting erratically. Such a shame, but mental illness runs in some bloodlines." I confronted my parents after the party. "Mental illness? Really? That's what you're telling people?" Sophia emerged from the kitchen, her phone in hand, smirking. "Oh, Bianca, you really should be more careful about your public breakdowns." She showed me a video on her Instagram story. It was me crying in my car after they'd canceled my insurance, but edited with dramatic music and the caption, "When your sister finally snaps," praying for her mental health journey. The video had been viewed thousands of times. The comments were brutal. People I'd known my whole life were expressing concern and suggesting treatment centers. My professional reputation, everything I'd built, was under attack. Aunt Martha, my father's sister, who'd always been the rebel of the family, pulled me aside as I was leaving. "Bianca, honey, I know what they're doing isn't right," she whispered, glancing around nervously. "But Harold has invested money for half this family. Catherine holds mortgages on the other half's homes. I can't afford to cross them. I'm sorry." I drove home that night with the growing realization that my parents weren't just cutting me off financially. They were systematically destroying my life. But even then, I had no idea how deep their cruelty would go. The next morning, I stopped by the ATM to grab cash for groceries. Insufficient funds. That was impossible. I had $15,000 in my savings account, every penny earned from double shifts and overtime at the hospital. I called the bank with shaking hands. "I'm sorry, Miss Harrison," the bank manager said after pulling up my account. "The joint account was closed yesterday by the primary account holder, Harold Harrison. The funds were legally withdrawn." Joint account, I opened that account myself when I turned 18. "According to our records, your father was added as a cosigner when you were a minor. That status was never changed." $15,000. Gone. My emergency fund, my safety net, my proof that I could make it on my own, vanished with a few keystrokes. I sat in my car in the bank parking lot trying to process the violation. That money was sacred to me, each dollar representing hours of holding sick children, comforting terrified parents, working through exhaustion. And they just took it. 3 days later, I was at Whole Foods cart, half full with groceries. I was now carefully calculating when my credit card was declined. Then the second one. Then the third. The teenage cashier looked at me with that mixture of pity and secondhand embarrassment that made my skin burn. "I'm sorry," I mumbled, abandoning my cart and fleeing to my car. My phone buzzed with email notifications. All 3 credit cards canceled. The accounts had been closed by the primary card holders, my parents, who had added me as an authorized user years ago when I started college. But the real blow came that afternoon. My landlord, Mr. Peterson, called, sounding uncomfortable. "Bianca, I'm sorry to do this, but I received a formal request from your co-signers to terminate your lease immediately. They're invoking the financial hardship clause." "What co-signers?" I asked, though I already knew. "Your parents co-signed when you moved in 3 years ago. They're stating they can no longer guarantee the rent and want to be released from obligation. Under the terms, that means you have 72 hours to vacate or find new guarantors." 72 hours. No savings, no credit cards, no co-signers. I'd never felt more alone. I spent the next day calling every apartment complex in my price range. The conversations all went the same way. Everything looked good until they ran my credit report. "I'm sorry, Miss Harrison, but there seems to be some unusual activity on your credit. Multiple accounts opened and maxed out in the last month, and this debt to Hartford Financial." "That's impossible," I said to the 5th property manager. "Can you tell me more about these accounts?" She rattled off credit cards, personal loans, even a car loan, all opened in my name within the last 30 days. The total debt was staggering, over $100,000. My parents hadn't just cut me off. They'd destroyed my financial future. I was sitting in my hospital break room, trying not to cry into my coffee, when Dr. Patricia Morgan, the hospital administrator, knocked on the door. "Bianca, could I see you in my office?" My stomach dropped. Dr. Morgan's usually warm face was carefully neutral as she closed her office door. "Bianca, we've received some concerning reports about your behavior both in and outside of work. Anonymous complaints about erratic actions, emotional instability, and now I'm hearing about significant financial irregularities." "Dr. Morgan, I can explain." She held up a hand. "I want to believe you, Bianca. You've been an exemplary nurse. But we have to take these complaints seriously, especially when they involve patient safety concerns. I'm placing you on administrative leave pending a full investigation." "Patient safety? I've never had a single complaint." "The report suggests you've been hiding your instability well, but that recent stressors have made it impossible to continue the facade." She was reading from a paper, and I recognized the language. It sounded exactly like my mother's measured professional tone. I cleaned out my locker in a daze. 3 years of perfect performance reviews, countless commendations. Relationships with patients and families I'd nurtured, all undermined by anonymous complaints I couldn't fight against. That night, I slept in my car in the hospital parking garage. I showered at Planet Fitness using the membership I thankfully paid annually. I was brushing my teeth in the gym bathroom when my phone rang. Derek's name on the screen made my heart skip. My ex-boyfriend, the one who'd broken up with me 6 months ago, saying he needed space, was suddenly calling. "Bianca, I heard about what's happening with your family. That's awful. Look, I have a spare room. No strings, just a friend helping a friend." I should have been suspicious. Derek never did anything without strings. But I was desperate, and the thought of a real bed and a hot shower that lasted more than 5 minutes clouded my judgment. His apartment looked different. Feminine touches everywhere. Fresh flowers, candles I recognized from Home Goods because Sophia had the same ones. I was too exhausted to process the warning signs. I collapsed into the guest bed and slept for 12 straight hours. I woke up to voices in the living room. Sophia's laugh bright and cruel. "Did you get the pictures?" "Every angle," Derek replied. "Her car in the driveway, her shoes by the door, her jacket on the chair. It definitely looks like she moved in." "Perfect." Mom's lawyer needs evidence she's unstable and making impulsive decisions. Moving in with an ex-boyfriend days after losing her apartment, classic manic behavior. I crept to the door, phone in hand, recording everything. "I still can't believe you dated her for 2 years," Sophia continued. "She's so pathetically desperate for approval, but I guess that worked in our favor." One call and she came running. "The 50,000 your parents promised helps me overlook her personality." Derek laughed. "Though I draw the line at actually touching her again. That's why you're here every night, babe." My sister was sleeping with my ex-boyfriend. They'd orchestrated this whole thing. I slipped back into the room, grabbed my things, and climbed out the window rather than face them. But I kept the recording. 2 days later, I was served with a restraining order. The petition claimed I'd been stalking my family, showing up at their home, repeatedly making threats. Photos were attached of me supposedly trying to break into their house. The angle was clever. You couldn't see that I was actually just walking past on the public sidewalk. But it looked damning. My whole life had been methodically dismantled in less than 2 weeks. And we were just getting started. Monica had been my best friend since we were 7 years old. She was there when I cried over my first heartbreak, celebrated with me when I got into nursing school, and held my hand through every family disappointment. So when she stopped returning my calls during the worst crisis of my life, I knew something was terribly wrong. I finally caught her coming out of Starbucks on Main Street. "Monica, wait!" I called, jogging to catch up. The look on her face when she saw me was pure panic. "I can't talk to you," she said quickly, trying to push past me. "Can't talk to me, Mon. I'm sleeping in my car. My parents destroyed my credit. I need my best friend." She glanced around nervously, then pulled me into the alley beside the coffee shop. "Bianca, I'm sorry, but I just got hired at your mom's firm. Senior marketing director, 150 base plus bonuses. It's life-changing money." "She bought you." The words came out flat, emotionless. "It's not like that," Monica protested, but her designer handbag and fresh highlights told a different story. "She just helped me see that enabling your delusions isn't healthy. You need professional help, this victim complex, these wild conspiracy theories about your family." "Conspiracy theories, Monica. You were there when they canceled my health insurance. You helped me move my stuff into storage." Her phone buzzed. Catherine's name flashed on the screen. Monica's face went pale. "I have to go. And Bianca, don't contact me again. My new position requires a certain level of professional distance from unstable individuals." She hurried away, leaving me standing in an alley like garbage. 21 years of friendship sold for a 6-figure salary. The betrayals came like dominoes after that. My godmother Grace, who'd held me as a baby and promised my grandmother she'd always look after me, sent a formal text saying she could no longer maintain our relationship. When I drove to her boutique in Fairfield to ask why I found a "closed for renovations" sign, her neighbor told me Grace had shut down suddenly after losing her biggest commercial real estate lease. "Something about the property owner finding violations," she whispered. Grace was devastated. I didn't need to ask who owned the property. Then there was Jeffrey, my younger cousin, who I'd spent 2 years helping through addiction recovery. I'd driven him to meetings, held him through withdrawals, celebrated every milestone of sobriety with him. He owed me his life, or so he'd told me 100 times. Now he was standing on my parents' perfectly manicured lawn, telling a circle of relatives that I was the one with substance abuse issues. "She hides it well, Sol," he said earnestly. "But I've seen the signs. The erratic behavior, the paranoia, the financial problems. Classic addict patterns." Aunt Helen nodded sympathetically. "Your poor parents, dealing with one child's mental health crisis while planning another's wedding." I watched from my car across the street, documenting everything on my phone. Jeffrey's new Rolex caught the sunlight as he gestured. 30 pieces of silver adjusted for inflation. At the hospital, my administrative leave stretched on. Coworkers who used to grab lunch with me now averted their eyes in the hallways when I came in for meetings with HR. The Whisper network was efficient and cruel. Bianca Harrison was unstable. Bianca Harrison had been stealing medications. Bianca Harrison had threatened her family. None of it was true, but truth had become irrelevant. Sophia made sure of that with her weekly visits to my workplace. She played the concerned sister, perfectly dabbing at her eyes with tissues as she asked the security guard if I'd been around, clutching a folder marked medical power of attorney, just visibly enough for people to see. I just want to help her, I heard her tell the head of pediatrics one afternoon. Our family has resources for the best treatment facilities, but she refuses help. Did you know she's been living in her car, making wild accusations about identity theft and conspiracies? It's textbook paranoid delusion. The security footage that would have shown I was nowhere near the hospital during my alleged erratic episodes. Mysteriously corrupted. The IT department was so sorry, but these things happened with older systems. The fact that my mother had just donated $1 million to the hospital's new cancer wing was, of course, pure coincidence. Emma Chen, a fellow pediatric nurse, was the only one who didn't buy the narrative. She pulled me aside after one particularly humiliating HR meeting where I'd been asked to submit to a psychiatric evaluation. "This is bullshit," she said bluntly. "I've worked with you for 3 years. You're the most stable person in this chaos factory." She glanced around, then handed me a flash drive. "I've been recording some things. Sophia's visits the conversations afterward the way our supervisor's story keeps changing. I don't know if it helps, but you deserve at least one person in your corner." Before I could thank her, she was already walking away. Smart. Being seen as my ally was becoming professionally dangerous. The climax came on a Thursday afternoon. I was in the hospital cafe using their Wi-Fi to apply for jobs in other states when my parents walked in with their lawyer, Mr. Richardson. They moved with the confidence of people who own the world, which in my small corner of it, they did. "Bianca," my mother said smoothly, placing a thick folder on my table. "We're here to help you." I didn't touch the papers. Let me guess. Declaration of mental incompetence. My father's jaw tightened. "You're sick, Bianca. Living in your car, making accusations, unable to hold a job. We're offering you a chance to get better. Sign the papers, let us take guardianship, and we'll ensure you get the best care. The best care in a facility where I'll be so medicated I can't contest grandmother's will," I asked quietly. Something flickered in my mother's eyes. Surprise maybe that I'd figured out their endgame. Mr. Richardson leaned forward. "Miss Harrison, your options are limited. Your credit is destroyed. You're unemployable in healthcare after these concerning reports, and frankly, your recent behavior patterns support our petition with or without your consent. This is the easy way." "What's the hard way?" I asked. My mother smiled, and it was the coldest thing I'd ever seen. "The hard way is we proceed with involuntary commitment based on the testimony of multiple family members and healthcare professionals about your escalating delusions and potential for self-harm. The same result, but with the added public humiliation of being forcibly hospitalized." "You'd need evidence of immediate danger," I said. "Derek has some very concerning texts from you," Sophia chimed in from behind me. I hadn't heard her approach. "Talking about how you can't go on, how everyone's against you. Time-stamped from last night. I'd been asleep in my car last night. My phone had been with me the whole time, but they'd thought of everything. 24 hours, my father said standing. Sign the papers voluntarily, or we file for emergency custody. Your choice." They swept out like a royal entourage, leaving me shaking at my little cafe table. Other patrons stared, then quickly looked away. I'd become that person, the one having a public family crisis, too messy to acknowledge. But as I sat there, Emma's flash drive burning in my pocket, something shifted inside me. They'd taken everything, turned everyone against me, backed me into a corner with no escape. They thought they'd won. They were wrong. When you have nothing left to lose, you become dangerous in ways people like my parents could never understand. And I was about to show them exactly what their mistake was capable of. Living in a Honda Civic wasn't something they taught you in nursing school. 3 weeks in, I'd developed a system. Park in 24-hour Walmart lots, rotate locations nightly. Keep baby wipes for basic hygiene, and never ever let anyone see you sleeping. The Planet Fitness membership was a lifesaver for showers, but even that was getting risky. I'd overheard employees discussing the homeless woman who spends too much time in the locker room. The infection started small. A cut on my leg from climbing over my car's center console one too many times. Trying to reach something in the back. Without health insurance, I couldn't afford antibiotics. I cleaned it obsessively with stolen hydrogen peroxide from a gas station bathroom, but stress and poor nutrition made my body an easy target. Within days, red streaks were climbing up my calf. I knew what blood poisoning looked like. I also knew that emergency rooms couldn't refuse treatment, but the bills would give my parents more ammunition. Another sign of my inability to care for myself. I dosed myself with expired antibiotics I'd hoarded from past prescriptions and prayed. That's when I noticed the silver Toyota following me. Professional grade surveillance, always 3 cars back, switching positions with a blue Honda every few hours. My parents had hired private investigators. I started taking photos of the cars, documenting the stalking, but what was the point? Who would I show them to? The investigators were thorough. They photographed me washing my hair in a public restroom sink. They captured me counting change for a $1 menu burger. They documented me sleeping in my car, my mouth open, looking exactly like the mental patient my parents were painting me as. Every unflattering moment, every sign of desperation, all carefully cataloged. Thanksgiving arrived with surgical precision to wound. My phone lit up with family social media posts. Grateful for family. My mother captioned a photo of everyone gathered around her dining table. Sophia held up Jeffrey's new baby. My parents beamed aunts and uncles and cousins filled every seat. The place where I should have been was taken by Derek, his arm around Sophia, already part of the family I'd been erased from. The comments were worse than the photos. Such a beautiful family. You raised amazing children, Catherine. Sophia is glowing. Not one person asked where I was. Then came the gut punch. Sophia posted a photo wearing grandmother's sapphire necklace, the one explicitly left to me in her will. The one my grandmother had placed around my neck on her deathbed, whispering, "This held all my secrets, darling. Now it's yours." I'd kept it in my jewelry box at my apartment, planning to move it to a safety deposit box. During the 72-hour eviction, I'd prioritized documents and clothes. They'd cleaned out the rest. Honored to wear Grandma's necklace at my first family gathering as an expectant mother. Sophia's caption read, "She always said this necklace belonged on the firstborn daughter." Now I understand what she meant. The rage gave me energy. I drove to my parents' office building, determined to confront them, but I was smart about it this time. I started recording on my phone before I even entered the building. The security guard recognized me, but didn't stop me. My mother was in her corner office going through property listings. She didn't look surprised when I walked in. "The necklace was mine," I said with pussy sad, without preamble. "Prove it," she said, simply, not looking up from her computer. "You know grandmother left it to me. You were there?" I remember a confused elderly woman making promises she wasn't mentally capable of keeping. Thank goodness we had power of attorney to protect her assets from being given away to anyone who visited. My father entered from his adjoining office. "Still playing the victim, I see." "I'm not playing anything. You stole from me. You destroyed my credit. You turned everyone against me." He laughed, actually laughed. "You did that yourself. We just stopped enabling your delusions of adequacy." I kept my voice steady, the phone recording everything from my pocket. "Why? What did I do that was so terrible?" They exchanged a look, and for a moment the masks slipped. "You were too much like her," my mother said quietly. "Your grandmother. Always questioning, always fighting, never knowing your place. We spent 20 years trying to train it out of you, but you insisted on being difficult." "Sophia understands hierarchy," my father added. "She knows her role, plays it perfectly. You actually thought you were our equal. Working your little job, living your little life, acting like you didn't owe us complete obedience for allowing you to exist. So you decided to destroy me." "We decided to correct a mistake," my mother said. "You were never supposed to happen. I had my perfect daughter, but Harold insisted on trying for a son. Instead, we got you. Stubborn, defiant, average you." The words should have hurt, but they freed something in me instead. "I have this entire conversation recorded," I said, pulling out my phone. My mother's smile was pitying. "Oh, sweetie, you think that matters? Who's going to believe the mentally unstable woman living in her car over respected members of the community? Please share your little recording. It'll just prove how delusional you've become, secretly recording family members trying to help you." Security arrived, then 2 large men who'd clearly been waiting nearby. As they escorted me out, my father called after me. "Sign the papers, Bianca. It's the only option where you retain any dignity." My car finally gave up on a Tuesday morning, black smoke pouring from under the hood on Route 95. The tow truck driver took pity on me, seeing everything I owned crammed inside, and towed it to a lot where I had 24 hours to pay or lose it all. I managed to grab 2 bags of essentials before time ran out. The rest, including the photo albums I'd saved my nursing school diploma, and yes, my grandmother's last letter to me, disappeared into the impound system. That night, I found myself in a 24-hour laundromat feeding quarters into a dryer just to have somewhere warm to sit. The fluorescent lights hummed. A homeless veteran in the corner nodded at me with the recognition of shared circumstances. I'd treated his daughter once back when I was a respected pediatric nurse. Now we were equals. My phone battery died. I had nowhere to charge it. No address for job applications. No professional clothes for interviews. The infection in my leg was spreading despite my amateur treatment. Everything my parents had predicted was coming true, not because I was mentally ill, but because they'd systematically removed every support structure I had. I curled up on the plastic chair, my worldly possessions in 2 garbage bags at my feet, and considered my options. Sign the papers, let them win, spend the rest of my life in a medicated haze while they stole my inheritance, or fight back with nothing but my word against theirs. That's when Emma walked in, arms full of laundry, despite living nowhere near this neighborhood. She took one look at me and sat down, pulling out her phone. "I've been looking everywhere for you," she said quietly. "We need to talk. My brother James is a lawyer, and what's happening to you? It has a name. It's called financial abuse, and your parents just made a big mistake. They got cocky, and cocky people always forget about the evidence they leave behind." She pulled out a folder, thick with papers, ready to fight back. For the first time in weeks, I smiled. Rock bottom, it turned out, was just a foundation to build on. Emma's apartment was small but clean. Nothing like the luxury I'd grown up in, but it felt like a palace after weeks in my car. She set me up on her couch, handed me antibiotics her brother had somehow procured, and didn't ask questions when I cried in her shower for 20 minutes straight. "My brother James will be here in the morning," she said, handing me tea and a grilled cheese. "He's been looking into your parents since I gave him that flash drive. Bianca, what they're doing, it's criminal." James Chen arrived at 7 a.m. sharp, looking nothing like the corporate sharks my parents employed. Young Ernest with boxes of files and a laptop covered in social justice stickers. "I do employment law, but this..." He spread papers across Emma's coffee table. "This is a conspiracy that crosses into multiple criminal territories." He showed me printed emails between my parents and various family members discussing the Bianca problem and ensuring compliance. Bank records showing large transfers to Derek, Jeffrey, and Monica immediately after they'd turned on me. But the most damning was a thread between my parents and their lawyer about my grandmother's trust. "Your grandmother was smarter than they gave her credit for," James explained. "She set up 2 trusts. One they knew about, worth about $500,000, but there's another one worth considerably more that only activates if you can prove sound mind and financial independence by age 30. Your parents found out about it 6 months ago." "How much more?" I asked. $2.8 million. "And if you're declared mentally incompetent, it reverts to them as your guardians." The room spun. Everything clicked into place. The timing, the systematic destruction, the push for guardianship. It was never about my defiance or being a mistake. It was about money. "But here's what they didn't count on," James continued. "Their investigator, Stan Morrison, he's having an attack of conscience. Seems he drew the line at manufactured evidence." The door buzzed. Emma checked the security camera and nodded. Stan Morrison looked like exactly what he was, a former cop turned private investigator, but his eyes held genuine regret. "Miss Harrison," he said, sitting heavily, "I've done surveillance for 20 years. Divorce cases, insurance fraud, corporate espionage. But this," he pulled out a tablet. "Your parents asked me to doctor evidence, create threatening texts, manipulate photos, even plant drugs in your car." My hands shook. "Did you?" "No, but I documented every request." He scrolled through emails, recorded phone calls, text messages. "They got sloppy, thought throwing money around made them untouchable. Your mother actually put in writing that she wanted me to create evidence of you stalking them." "Why are you helping me?" I asked. He showed me a photo on his phone. A young woman, early 20s, bright smile. "My daughter. She has bipolar disorder. Manages it beautifully, has a great life. But I've seen how people weaponize mental health to control and abuse. What your parents are doing, it's evil." Emma had been quiet, but now she spoke up. "My cousins work at 3 different hospitals in the network. They've been tracking Sophia's visits. She's been to 12 facilities in 3 weeks, all with the same story about her dangerous sister. But here's the thing, she's been sloppy too. Used the same fabricated incidents with different dates. claimed you threatened her at the hospital on a day you were provably 50 miles away. Aunt Martha called that evening using a burner phone. "Can't talk long," she whispered. "But you need to know your father's in trouble. His firm found discrepancies. He's been moving money to offshore accounts. And your mother, 3 of her biggest property deals are being investigated for fraud. They need that trust money to cover their tracks. Martha, they'll destroy you for telling me this." "Honey, I'm 73 years old with stage 4 cancer. What are they going to do? Kill me faster?" "Your grandmother was my best friend. She'd haunt me if I didn't help her granddaughter. She gave me a name and number. Douglas Fleming. He was your grandmother's real lawyer, the one your parents don't know about. Call him." Douglas Fleming answered on the second ring, as if he'd been waiting for my call for months. Which it turned out he had. "Bianca, finally. Your grandmother predicted this exact scenario. She knew your parents would try something when they found out about the second trust. That's why she built in safeguards. But we need to move fast. They're filing for emergency guardianship in 3 days." The safeguards were brilliant. My grandmother had required 3 independent psychiatric evaluations from court-appointed doctors, not family choices. She'd mandated financial forensics on anyone claiming guardianship. Most importantly, she'd hidden affidavits from 5 family friends testifying to my mental stability dated just months before her death. "She also left this," Douglas said, handing me a sealed envelope with my name in her shaky handwriting. Inside her final letter to me, "My darling Bianca, if you're reading this with Douglas, then your parents have shown their true colors. I'm sorry, sweet girl. I tried to protect you, but some lessons must be learned through pain. You were never a mistake. You were my greatest hope, the only one strong enough to break the cycle. Your parents worship money and status. Sophia learned to play their game, but you chose integrity. The trust is yours, but more importantly, the truth is yours. In my safety deposit box, you'll find records of every cruel thing your parents have done, not just to you, but to others. Use it wisely. Remember, phoenixes rise from ashes, not from comfort. All my love, grandmother." Emma's brother had been building our legal strategy while we uncovered evidence. We file multiple lawsuits simultaneously: defamation, financial fraud, identity theft, intentional infliction of emotional distress. We also file criminal complaints for the identity theft and fraud. But Bianca, they'll come at you hard. Are you ready? I thought about the laundromat, the infection, the complete destruction of everything I'd built. Then I thought about my grandmother's letter, Emma's kindness, Stan's conscience, Martha's courage. "I'm ready!" The transformation began immediately. James filed for emergency injunctions preventing my parents from accessing any more of my accounts or making claims about my mental health. Douglas petitioned the court to recognize the trust with me as sole beneficiary. Stan Morrison went to the FBI with evidence of financial crimes. But the real shift came from an unexpected source. Monica, panicking as her complicity became clear, sent a text begging forgiveness and admitting everything. I screenshotted it before she could delete it. She detailed how my parents had orchestrated each betrayal, how they'd paid people off, how they'd threatened others into compliance. "Please," her text read, "I'll testify to everything. They made me sign NDAs, but I don't care. I can't live with myself. Your mother laughed about taking your grandmother's necklace. Said you were too stupid to deserve it." The screenshots went into our evidence folder. My parents had created a paper trail of their own downfall, too arrogant to believe their mistake could ever fight back. Emma helped me clean up, bought me professional clothes for court appearances. Her brother worked 18-hour days building an airtight case. Stan provided surveillance footage of my parents meeting with people they'd bribed. Martha quietly spread the real story through the family grapevine. "You know what's funny?" I said to Emma one night reviewing depositions. "They called me average ordinary. But ordinary people are the ones who survive. We're used to fighting for everything." "They mistook your kindness for weakness," Emma replied. "Classic villain mistake. 3 days before the guardianship hearing, we were ready. 17 witnesses, hundreds of documents, recorded confessions, financial evidence. My parents had built a house of cards on a foundation of cruelty. It was time to blow it down. The courtroom smelled like old wood and justice deferred. I sat between James and Douglas Fleming, wearing the single professional outfit Emma had bought me, looking every inch the stable, competent adult my parents claimed I wasn't. Across the aisle, my parents' legal team looked like a small army. Harold and Catherine Harrison had never lost a legal battle in their lives. They were about to. James filed our countersuits that morning, the stack of papers landing like a bomb in the quiet clerk's office. Defamation, fraud, identity theft, intentional infliction of emotional distress, conspiracy. The criminal complaints had been filed separately with the FBI and state authorities. My parents didn't know that yet. Your Honor, their lead attorney Richardson began smoothly. We're here today because a family is concerned about their daughter's deteriorating mental state. Actually, James interrupted, standing, we're here because Mr. and Mrs. Harrison engaged in a systematic campaign to destroy their daughter's life in order to steal her inheritance. The judge, an elderly woman with sharp eyes, looked intrigued. That's quite an accusation, Counselor. It's not an accusation, Your Honor. It's a documented fact. James opened his laptop. May I present evidence? What followed was a massacre. Emma's recordings played through the courtroom speakers. Sophia's voice cruel and calculating, discussing the plan to humiliate me. My parents caught on their own security system, admitting I was too much like grandmother and needed to be corrected. Stan Morrison took the stand, his testimony devastating. Mrs. Harrison offered me $50,000 to plant cocaine in her daughter's car, he said clearly. When I refused, she said, and I quote, then find another way. I don't care if you have to run her over, make it look like she's crazy. My mother's perfect composure cracked. He's lying. I have the recordings, Stan said simply. The financial evidence was worse. Account after account opened in my name, maxed out the money, traced directly to my parents' accounts. They'd been so confident in their plan, they hadn't even tried to hide it properly. Dr. Patricia Morgan from the hospital testified via video link. After reviewing the evidence, it's clear that the complaints against Nurse Harrison were fabricated. We've reinstated her with full back pay and a formal apology. She's one of our finest pediatric nurses. Monica's testimony was brutal in its honesty. They bought me, she said, tears streaming. Offered me a salary I couldn't refuse, then told me exactly what to say about Bianca. They had scripts talking points about her mental health. They said if I didn't comply, they'd ensure I never worked in marketing again. But the killing blow came from Aunt Martha, who walked in supported by a cane, but with fire in her eyes. Harold Harrison has been stealing from this family for years, she announced. Investment accounts drained property deals that only benefited him. He's been using Bianca as a scapegoat to distract from his embezzlement. Objection! Richardson shouted. On what grounds? The judge asked coldly. Martha continued producing documents. I have records. 30 years of financial manipulation. He needed Bianca declared incompetent to access her grandmother's trust and cover his theft. Catherine knew. She helped. My father's face went from red to white. You bitter old woman? Harold, my mother hissed, but Martha wasn't done. Your Honor, I also have evidence that they've been threatening family members who tried to help Bianca. They held mortgages and investments hostage, destroyed my friend Grace's business, paid off Jeffrey to lie about addiction that never existed. The judge called a recess. When we returned, federal agents were waiting in the hallway. The FBI had been investigating my parents' financial crimes for 3 months. My complaint, just the final piece they needed. Mr. and Mrs. Harrison, the lead agent said, you're under arrest for wire fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy. The courtroom erupted. My mother, always so composed, screamed at me as they cuffed her. You ungrateful bitch, we gave you everything! No, I said quietly. You gave Sophia everything. You gave me strength. The emergency guardianship petition was dismissed with prejudice. The judge ordered immediate restoration of all my accounts, damages for defamation, and criminal prosecution for the identity theft. Douglas Fleming presented grandmother's trust documents, now cleared of all challenges. But we weren't done. Over the following weeks, the dominoes continued falling. My father's investment firm discovered the extent of his embezzlement, $3 million over 5 years, hidden through complex trades and offshore accounts. The board fired him and pressed charges. My mother's real estate empire crumbled when investigators found she'd been falsifying property values and forging signatures on deals. Her license was revoked, her assets frozen pending investigation. Sophia, the golden child, watched her perfect life implode. Her wedding was called off when Christopher Whitman's senator father wanted no association with scandal. The pregnancy she'd announced at Thanksgiving a lie to lock in the engagement. Her law firm rescinded their job offer. The Bar Association opened an ethics investigation based on her conspiracy to commit fraud. "Please," she begged, showing up at Emma's apartment. "Bianca, we're sisters. I was just doing what they told me. You know how they are." "I know exactly how they are," I replied. "And I know how you are. You enjoyed every second of my pain." "I'll be on the streets," she wailed. "There's a nice laundromat on 5th Street, open 24 hours. The chairs aren't too uncomfortable." She left sobbing. I felt nothing but peace. The extended family, freed from my parents' financial control, reached out one by one. Jeffrey, broken by guilt, entered rehab voluntarily this time. "I betrayed the only person who actually helped me," he said in his apology letter. "I'll spend the rest of my life making amends." Grace reopened her boutique with a small business loan I co-signed. She hugged me for 5 straight minutes when we met, both of us crying. "Your grandmother would be so proud," she whispered. At the hospital, I was welcomed back like a returning hero. My story had spread, and I had become an inspiration to other staff members facing workplace harassment. They created new policies, protecting employees from malicious complaints. Emma and I became true sisters, bonded by battle. Her brother James took on 3 more financial abuse cases pro bono, inspired by our victory. Stan Morrison started a foundation helping abuse victims gather evidence safely. The final court hearing was for the trust. Douglas Fleming presented the case to a different judge, laying out how my grandmother had protected the inheritance from exactly this scenario. "Your grandmother," the judge said, reviewing the documents, "was a remarkable woman. She anticipated every move your parents might make and built in protections. The trust is yours, Ms. Harrison, as she intended. $2.8 million. Not enough to fix the months of trauma, but enough to rebuild better than before." I sat in that courtroom thinking of sleeping in my car, of counting quarters for food, of the infection that almost killed me because I couldn't afford antibiotics. "Your Honor," I said, standing, "I'd like to use a portion of this trust to establish a foundation for family scapegoats and financial abuse victims. My grandmother protected me even in death. I want to pay that forward." The judge smiled. "I think she would have loved that." As I left the courthouse, my phone buzzed with a text from my mother's prison account. "This isn't over." I deleted it without responding. She was wrong. It was over. They'd called me their mistake, tried to erase me, nearly succeeded in destroying me. But mistakes, I'd learned, were just opportunities waiting to be corrected, and I'd corrected theirs by becoming everything they'd tried to prevent: successful, independent, and absolutely unstoppable. 1 year later, I stood in front of 300 people at the National Conference on Family Financial Abuse, my grandmother's sapphire necklace catching the stage lights. The courts had ordered its return, along with everything else my parents had stolen. But wearing it wasn't about the jewelry. It was about the promise I'd made to use my voice. They called me their mistake. I began looking out at faces that reflected my own journey. Said I should never have been born. Systematically destroyed my life to steal my inheritance. But here's what I learned: when someone calls you a mistake, they're usually confessing their own. The foundation I'd created, Phoenix Rising, had helped dozens of families in its first year. We provided legal resources, emergency housing, and most importantly, validation for people whose families had gaslit them into questioning their own sanity. My parents' convictions had been swift and decisive. Harold got 7 years for embezzlement and fraud. Catherine got 5 for conspiracy and identity theft. They'd lost everything: the house, the cars, the status they'd valued above their own daughter. Last I heard, they were fighting over who was to blame in their separate cells. Sophia worked at a department store in the mall, her law career dead before it started. She'd sent 100 letters begging forgiveness, each one more desperate than the last. I'd read none of them. Some bridges, once burned, provided better warmth as ashes. The money didn't heal me. I continued my speech. Truth did. Community did. Learning that family isn't about blood, but about who shows up when you're sleeping in a laundromat did. Emma sat in the front row, now my foundation's director of outreach. Her brother James headed our legal aid division. Stan Morrison ran our investigation unit, helping victims safely document abuse. Even Aunt Martha, defying her doctor's predictions, served on our board of directors. They thought taking everything would break me. Instead, it revealed who I really was beneath their expectations. A survivor, a fighter, a woman who refused to let their cruelty define her worth. After the speech, people lined up to share their stories. A young man whose parents drained his college fund. A woman whose siblings conspired to steal her inheritance. A teenager whose family called her worthless daily. Each story broke my heart and strengthened my resolve. Monica found me during the reception. She looked older, tired, wearing clothes from Target instead of Nordstrom. "I don't expect forgiveness," she said quietly. "I just wanted you to know that I testify for your foundation now. Tell my story as a warning about what happens when you choose money over friendship." "Good," I said simply. "Make it count." Grace catered the event, her boutique now thriving. She'd become like a second mother, the one who chose me rather than birthed me. "Your grandmother's watching," she said, hugging me, "probably laughing at how badly your parents played themselves." Jeffrey, 2 years sober, volunteered at our crisis hotline. His betrayal had become his turning point. "I tell callers that the person they betray most when they lie is themselves," he explained. "You saved my life twice, Bianca. Once from addiction, once from becoming like them." Dr. Morgan recruited from our foundation, hiring survivors for hospital positions. "Trauma builds empathy," she said. "You've created a pipeline of the most compassionate healthcare workers I've ever seen." But the best moment came when a young woman approached me after the conference. "I'm Sarah," she said, clutching a folder. "My family did the same thing. Said I was worthless, stole my college fund, tried to have me committed. I thought I was crazy until I found your story online." "You're not crazy," I assured her. "You're targeted. There's a difference." "I know that now. I wanted to thank you, and..." She handed me the folder. "I'm starting law school next year. I want to be like Mr. Chen, helping people like us. This is my acceptance letter. I wrote about you in my essay." I cried then, right there in the conference hall. Not tears of pain, but of purpose. Every night in my car, every humiliation, every betrayal had led to this breaking the cycle for others. That evening, I returned to my small but cozy house, the one I'd bought with my own money, decorated with photos of my chosen family. No marble countertops or infinity pools, just warmth and authenticity. My phone rang. "Unknown number from the correctional facility. You destroyed our lives," my mother's voice hollow and bitter. "No," I corrected, settling into my favorite chair. "You destroyed your own lives. I just survived long enough to watch." "We're your parents," she shrieked. "You owed us obedience." "I owed you nothing. Children aren't possessions. They're not investments. They're not mistakes to be erased when they don't perform to expectations. You were supposed to be grateful. For what? For treating me like an unwanted burden, for stealing from me, for trying to destroy my sanity for money?" I laughed, surprising myself. "I am grateful, actually. You showed me exactly who not to become." The line went dead. I blocked the number and made tea, settling in to read grant applications for the foundation. We were expanding, creating safe houses in 3 cities, launching a legal clinic, developing an app for documenting abuse safely. My grandmother's letter sat framed on my desk. Phoenixes rise from ashes, not from comfort. She'd known. Somehow she'd known that their cruelty would forge my strength. A text from Emma lit up my phone. "Family dinner, Sunday. James is making his famous dumplings." "Wouldn't miss it," I replied. Another from Grace. "Shopping tomorrow. That doctor you saved wants to donate designer clothes to the foundation." From Stan. "3 more families saved this week. You started something amazing, kid." I looked around my simple, beautiful life. No mansion, no luxury cars, no country club membership. Just genuine love, purposeful work, and the knowledge that I'd transformed their weapon into my wisdom. They'd been right about one thing: I was never meant to be like them. Thank God for that. Their mistake hadn't been giving birth to me. Their mistake had been underestimating the power of someone with nothing left to lose and everything to gain. I opened my laptop and started typing. "Dear Phoenix Rising family, today marks 1 year since I filed my first police report against my parents. 1 year since I chose truth over silence, justice over submission. To everyone reading this who's been called a mistake, who's had family try to erase them, who's been labeled crazy for refusing to accept abuse, you are not alone. You are not crazy. You are not a mistake. You are a phoenix waiting to rise. With love and solidarity, Bianca Harrison, founder, Phoenix Rising Foundation." As I hit send, sharing my story with thousands of survivors, I realized the ultimate irony. My parents had spent years trying to make me disappear. Instead, they'd created someone impossible to ignore. Their mistake, it had become my greatest victory. What would you do if your own family called you their biggest mistake and tried to destroy your entire life? Have you ever felt like the scapegoat in your family? the one who could never do anything right, no matter how hard you tried. I'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories of survival and triumph. Share this with anyone who needs to hear that they're not alone in their family struggles. Remember, sometimes the people who are supposed to love us the most are the ones we need to love ourselves enough to leave behind. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and may you find the strength to rise from whatever ashes life has given you. Until next time, remember, you are not a mistake. You are a miracle waiting to unfold.